Right, guys. So I thought I would go through kind of like the next 4 to, I guess, 6 weeks. It's going to be the next 6 weeks of this like strength and conditioning block. Now what I've done, um, could be. I say 6 weeks. It could be 6 to 8 weeks, depending on how I do the last 2 weeks of this phase. But as it stands at the moment, what we're going into is it just extending this first phase of accessory movements. Now I've switched a couple out, but all of the accessory movements after your big compounds, so like after your bench press, you've got your flies, your presses, your dips, they're staying in. So those movements are going to be staying into the program. Um, but I'm going to be like switching around how we do those first movements, so the bench press and back squats. Um, all it is for 2 weeks. I'm going to be adding a pause on each of the lifts. So with deadlifts, we're going to be adding a pause just below the knee. With bench press, a pause at the chest, and with back squats, a pause at the bottom. Now, there's two reasons. One is I want to work on positioning, so your positioning within those lifts, how to stay tight at the bottom of a bench press, how to keep your body tense and tight during your deadlift, and same with your back squat. It's all about trying to keep tension and keep the good positions that we like should be falling into during those lifts, and also to give you the opportunity to actually push a bit more on those accessory movements. Now, what I'm finding, and I don't know about you guys, but when I'm doing weight training, what I found a lot of times when I keep the same exercise in for myself and my clients, they seem to progress a lot on it and seem to get a lot of benefits from it. Now, when it comes to you guys deciding what you're doing throughout this, let me go on to that in a minute. But let me go on to that in a minute. So, the reason I like to extend the amount of time you're doing your accessories for, and even your main lifts, like, is because we're trying to practice the movements. Now, I know it may seem boring, um, but part of what we're trying to do is actually nail the movements as good as we can. Try to connect to the muscles that we're trying to connect to, so we can feel everything we need to feel as we do it, and get the benefits from it, like mainly. Especially if you're trying to build muscle, like the one way you build muscle is you do the same exercise over and over again, increasing the load on that exercise and increasing the kind of tension that you place on your muscles. So that is improving form, improving reps, and improving weight. That is basically how we do it. And if we can keep the exercises the same as we go through, that will be like beneficial to help us be able to do that. So for 2 weeks, we're going to be adding in just these pauses. One that brings the load right down, but again, just working on that tension part of it. Now, when I was talking about the way you create your own session, now you have these specialist sessions and stuff like that. But looking at this week, if you were to look at the 7 sessions, you've got 7 sessions to do. But you actually don't have 7 sessions to do. Now, to be honest with you, I've put optional on the specialist session and I put optional on the mobility and run session, but that's completely up to you. Now, if your goal is strength focused, again, do the weight training rather than the conditioning pieces, so the run and the conditioning here. Do the weight training, because if that's your goal, that would be the way to kind of um, adjust your training, if that makes sense. If your goal is a bit of fitness and a bit of conditioning, then yes, add that in. Now, depending on how much you're training during your like sport, if you're not training, I mean, you may get away with training 7 days a week. I wouldn't recommend it. I would probably train a maximum of 6 days if you can recover pretty well, and manage your like fatigue pretty well. So if you're eating well and sleeping well, then you could probably get away with six. If there's any other stresses in your life, then 5 days would be perfect. So that means that you have to pick and choose what you're going to do. So you can't do all 7 sessions throughout a week plus your sport. Your best bet is to pick your priority. So if your priority is your sport, then you want to do the things that are going to improve the weaknesses within your sport. So if it is fitness, then you want to make sure you're doing your conditioning. If it is strength and size, you want to make sure you're doing the strength training components of this. Now, this is meant to run complementary to your sport. It's definitely running complementary to mine, but part also to be able to just use this as a program to build muscle, kind of build strength and conditioning. Now, again, the way you build muscle is just by increasing your reps, weight, and tension along the muscle. So if you can improve your technique, that's a great way to do it. If you can just find a way to get stronger, that's also a great way to do it. But remember, don't sacrifice kind of the amount of weight you want to put on the bar for like your form. So don't sacrifice that form just to add more weight. Now going forward, once we get into week 7, I want to show you this Thursday day. So this plyometrics lower strength and conditioning day. Because if you try to do all of them, you will very much not enjoy it. But there is a way you can do it all. You just have to be smart with how you do it. So it's going to go from week 7 lower. There's going to be a conditioning session on the Tuesday. So it'll go Monday's a lower session, Tuesday's conditioning, Wednesday's an upper session, so a push focused upper session. Thursday is a plyometrics lower end conditioning session, and then Friday is a upper pull focus session. Then you have your mobility and your specialist session on the side. Now, if you decide, this is a great way for you to be able to pick what your goal is. If your goal is to get faster and to improve your conditioning, I would suggest doing the plyometrics and the conditioning. Now, the way I'm going to be running this is I'm going to be doing the plyometrics. I'm then going to do the straight arm pull down and the deadlifts, and then I'm going to do the conditioning. Now, what I'm going to be doing at this point is our preseason would have ended or should have ended by this point, which means I'll be going into the start of my season either in week 7 or week 8 of this phase. That means I will make a decision based on fatigue and based on how my body's feeling and how I perform in a game, whether I still need to improve my conditioning or not. Because if I don't need to improve my conditioning crazy amounts, then I will probably just go to doing a lower strength session. Or based on how my legs are feeling for a Saturday game, adding in a specialist session. Now, this is why I like to give you the option of everything, because you can do whatever you want during this week. It's just the fact that you need to manage your recovery and then pick a priority. So that's like the main kind of point of this video is, yes, we're extending it this phase to focus on a couple more things. Yes, your accessory work is going to go on for 6 weeks rather than 4 weeks. But I've explained why. It's because we want to try and build that strength as much as possible, get connected as much as possible, and like improve how we do that exercise. So again, my biggest advice is pick a priority. Do you want to get stronger and build more muscle? Okay. Which would you rather do? Would you rather improve your sport or do that? Now you have to pick a priority, because then you have to pick what you want to do. Now, if you're not happy with picking a priority, what I would suggest is you do what we call periodizing. Now, what that means, and this is the way I do programming. This is how I periodize our sessions. So this is why it changes. This is why there's more conditioning from week 7 onwards, is because I'm going into a phase where I'm focusing on my conditioning. So not only will I be doing the 2 gym session conditionings, I'll be doing 2 rugby conditioning sessions as well. So this is where like you guys need to pick a focus, because then you can pick for the next 6 weeks, or from week 7 onwards, or whenever you decide to make the decision on what you're going to focus on, you can make the decision of, right, I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to focus on my sport. Now, what do I need to improve my sport? Like I've said before, or I'm going to focus on the next 4 weeks of just strength, which means my sport may take a little bit of a backseat, but my strength is going to take the priority as we run into the start of the season. Now, when the season starts, or when you decide to make a switch in your mind of what your focus is, that's great. Like, but make sure you pick a focus. Don't just kind of be afraid to make the decision, because if you can make a decision on what you're going to do, you'll get further than trying to like get everything. I think the phrase I've heard before is, the man who chases 2 ducks catches neither. So you cannot, ducks, maybe chickens, don't know. But that is basically what I'm trying to get you guys to think about, is just pick a priority. And that is why we're extending the weeks. Any questions, again, like always, by all means, just drop me a message. Thank you so much for sitting through this. Enjoy the rest of this block.